My name is Claudia Schnugg, and I'm leading the SEEDS project, Digital Sensemaking. So it's a SEEDS project at the Linz Institute of Technology, and it's located at the Institute for Business Engineering, Communications Engineering, Business Informatics. And I will quickly, I try to keep in time of the 50 minutes, introduce you to the project. So what are we doing? We look at digital transformation processes and try to better understand what is the body's role in this digital transformation process. And especially in the context of digital twins, cyber-physical systems, but also, for example, Industrie 4.0, so processes that are translated in companies from physical production processes into digital processes. And what we see in the literature is that it's difficult for many people to make sense of these digital transformation processes, and it's difficult to really make meaning of all the information that's there. So we somehow have an information overload, but it's very difficult to really then make sense of what we actually should do. And it's difficult to suddenly be reduced to screens and data when you were used to work with your body in production lines or wherever, but also to develop and establish new processes. And what we do, we want to specifically look at the body in the sense-making process, and we do this by employing performance art. I will come back and explain this later. So a little bit more to this basic idea. So what we have a lot of different tools to realize this digital transformation. So we can have something like point clouds of rooms or places that are built that totally make sense for an engineer, but not for someone working on site in the building process, for example. Or sensors that measure something that we do, but then it's difficult to interact and to understand this abstraction for someone who is not really part of this process of developing this and understanding what is the actual idea of combining all this. Sometimes we also use, for example, tangible interfaces to make this a little bit more tangible for users. So we already see that a little bit of tangible interface makes it more easy to grasp what these digital transformation processes or digitized processes can be and can do. But we want to go even further. So we want to understand this sense-making and how the sense-making is linked to the body. So going back to sense-making, we often say this makes sense or it doesn't. We're working here with the background of theoretical development over the last 30 years or so, from a theory based in social sciences that tries to understand how we make shared sense of situations that we encounter, of what we do, of how we experience our routines, how we experience our works, but also how we share interactions in our organizations. And how does something make sense and is correct, and then there might be a situation that something does not make sense anymore, and we try to exchange and understand what is the difference and how we should act then. And in the past few years, there's been a lot of discussion around sense-making theory, around this idea that it's mainly a cognitive theory, but the body actually plays a specific role, or actually a large role. At the same time, it's not only the body and embodiment, how we learn processes and how we do things and embody them, for example, with muscle memory, that plays a role in sense-making, but also this idea of being in the world, so we need to interact with our environment. We understand and see the materialities. We see how we connect to, for example, the rhythms of an organization, or the rhythm of a machine, or the feedback that a machine gives to us, or how we see that people sit together in a room and we suddenly see, okay, there is a tension or there is none. So these things are part of sense making as well. So there is this huge idea around, okay, we need to also connect to the environment, to technologies, but also to do more research around embodiment in this process. So some meta-studies in the past few years identified 4 core constituents, which were, on the one hand, this being in the world and embodiment, but also temporality. So something happens over time and we experience it. May it be clock time or may it be experience time. This is again up to a little bit of discussion in the scientific world, but both actually are relevant. And then language. So we express what we experience and we share. But this expression in this sense is mainly researched through language, but actually this expression is also articulation through other forms and media. So it does not really, is not only reduced to language, but also, for example, nonverbal communication. So this is why we employ performance art. What we do with performance art is mainly not building a theater play or staging a music band. Performance art, what we refer to here, is more from this very basic idea of what does a performance artist do. So performance artists, like a dancer or a choreographer, they work with their body. So it's about a relational process that is ephemeral, that is on the stage, that is relating to the audience and relating to a situation. So it already creates a lot of this being in the world, but also from in a two-directional way. So there is the audience that can observe, but also the performer that experiences something. And in that sense, they are really trained as performers to be aware of their body, and they have a lot of self-reflective practice in how they understand, how they react, or how they how different sensory input triggers some reactions to them. And this is actually what we would like to employ in our research to better understand, okay, when we create these digitalization processes, how would a performer then react? How can we work with a performer to better understand all these connections and to get a little bit more and deeper insight, which is right now very difficult to get if you ask random people on the street, because they are not trained in this embodied practice as others. And as I said before, there is on the one hand this sensory input that they are trained to understand, but also on the other hand there is this observation. So it's not only the observation of the performance, but also the performer observes the environment. So aesthetics plays a central role. And this in 2 different directions. So on the one hand, in this idea, in this also philosophical tradition of Baumgarten, how he says that aesthetics is also the idea of sensory cognition, whereas on the other hand, which is most people know of, is this evaluation of beauty or the sublime or the comic, which is more in the tradition of the idea of how Kant approached aesthetics. So we were interested also as this aesthetic, or looking at aesthetics as a potential additional information or potential additional data that is important to think of as bridge building between being in the world and the embodiment. So in that sense, this is a very interdisciplinary project. So it's based on organizational theory. It's drawing from arts knowledge and aesthetics knowledge, but also it's embedded within business informatics. So we have a lot of guiding questions that frame actually what we do. So we really try to employ the theories and the input from the different disciplines in order to frame our experiments and the phases where we work with the artists. I won't go into detail here because these are mainly very specific questions from the different disciplines. So what we do, and I forgot to mention at the beginning, we are now in the 11th month of a 2-year project, so still in the first half. So what we did to work with the artist is to be inspired by or approach this from a design science perspective. So we created 3 phases of work with the performance artists. In the first one, we really wanted to see or get in touch with the world and with the digital transformation processes and digital technologies and how humans connect. In the second one, we are now building hypotheses and trying to test them later on in the year, in the beginning of next year, with diverse subjects, which will be, again, a performative piece. So it's a performative installation developed by a performance artist and choreographer for participants from any background. And the data we gather there will be evaluated later. And then in the last phase, we will try to understand how to put this into action, again, working with performance artists. So here, the 3 specific phases. So what we had available as infrastructure, as technical infrastructure for the first phase was actually based on the projects at the department where this project is located. So we really wanted to go also into the use cases that are provided there. The performance artists worked actually with all of them, but they specifically then explored mainly working with the robot and with the M5 stack sensors. So what did they do? So they had the sensors for several weeks, and we asked them to develop small performances about things that they do with them. And the background actually is that as performance artists, in their specific case, they were absolutely not in touch with these kinds of sensors or with robots before. So it was about how do people with no background in this field try to approach and learn and make sense of the technology, how it works, and how it can be applied. So we did a lot of videos, photos, and work with them to track their process from trying to make it work, getting frustrated, understanding what kind of feedback means what, trying to build elaborate systems, but also trying to then be more fluent in handling these technologies and try to understand what are the aspects that make this handling more fluent. Similarly is what they did with the robots. So they started by trying to use it, handling it, just putting it out of the box, trying to use it, worked with it. But then it started to go further. So they did a lot of different experiments with what can I do with this robot, what is actually the physicality, but also how can I understand the movements, and how can this, from copying movements, try to define my own movements and understand the robot's movements so that I can move with it. And we let them develop their process and their performances just as they wanted to. So we gathered a lot of data, and we evaluated with typical methods that are used in sensemaking research, but also enhanced with methods used in performance research and visual anthropology to evaluate this process. And then we now are now at the first preliminary results of phase 1. And I see a lot of question marks in the phases because, of course, there is on the one hand this moving with the robot, which looks very disconnected for someone who was not there and who did not see the video. And on the other hand, why would anyone want to lie beneath a robot? So, and actually it was the same for us. Seeing how the performers interacted with this showed us that it's very strange what they want to do, but in the end, having all the interviews and evaluating all the data, it all made sense. So on the one hand, there are a lot of specific aesthetic elements that are important to embody this process and to better understand how to work with the technology, but also to grasp what these technological representation, like a digital twin, means. So it's not only about having a little bit of a light as feedback that is that has a little bit of meaning that some UX designer designed, because it's also about really experiencing this feedback and trying to learn to understand in order to get more fluent. So it's, of course, yes, there is this experience design and interaction design that is important, but it then plays also back as something that needs to be thought of when I do this digital transformation process as something that needs to be embodied over time. So we now actually developed a few hypotheses that we are now then testing in the second phase. And in the second phase, we work with another artist who will develop this performative installation where two people can explore together the technology, the feedback, the visuals, and the sound, and they will have also some kind of projections, so on and so forth, that they can play with as in an art installation. And this is currently on development, so by the end of the month we should have the performance, and then we will test it and realize it with a few test subjects. And now, acknowledgements. Thanks for everybody on the team also, and for the artists to work with us.